Welcome back to part 2, Intro to Excel, Module 1. Let's jump into the workbook to learn a little bit more about Excel. Now, data entry and basic formatting. Enter data, data types, edit the cell content, basic formatting, and aligning the cells left, middle, and bottom. Let's hop into the Excel workbook so we can get to that. I'm going to attach the PowerPoint to this lesson as I will with all of them, and that way you can follow along and we can make this a little bit faster versus having to switch between back and forth. And let's just jump into the Excel workbook. Let's look at data entry and all these different cool features. So as you can see on the left hand side, I have the rows grouped into groups. That way I can hide certain things. And to do that, you can go to the data tab and you can go to the outline portion of Excel and you can actually group rows, just a cool, and columns. You could do this as a cool way to organize your spreadsheets. So this is a text. This is also a text. This is also a text, this is also a text, and this is a text. Now we see here, these are different types of numbers in Excel, different formats here. We got some percentages, some decimals, and these are considered dates. Now when looking at Excel, Excel has a couple different data types, one being the whole numbers, the next being decimals, the next being text. So this says 1, but it technically is text, this being money, this being the date, this being time, this being something called Boolean, which basically just means true or false. And there are a couple different error values that you might get in Excel, such as this NA error, this value error, and this div divided by 0 error. These different errors are based on different calculation issues, and we'll learn a little bit more about that later in this course, but just know that these are errors in Excel. Okay, so let's enter data here. How can I enter data into a cell? It's pretty intuitive. All you want to do is just click on the cell and click into the cell by double clicking on your mouse, and you'll be able to enter the cell. The keyboard shortcut for entering a cell, which is very helpful, is FN F2, and you'll jump directly into the cell. That way you don't have to double click. Just a quick thing here. And now if we want to enter hello, my name is Matthew. Now the cell contents have changed. Let's go into formatting here. There are a ton of different types of formatting you could do to text, to numbers, etc. Now I misspelled fonts here, so let's fix this. And you can use the arrow keys to go between different characters in the cell. Now that is that. So let's look at the different fonts here. This is normal default font. And in order to get the changes, you go to the Home tab. And if I want to change this to, let's say, Abadi, I can change that font there. Now, next, there is some different other fonts like cursive fonts. And there's also the ability to bold your text. The keyboard shortcut for that is Control B. The italicized version of your text, Control I, and Control U to underline text. Next, if you want to add a border, you can go up to here and click on this little icon, and this will drop down the different opportunities and different types of borders that you're able to make. So if I want to make a thick outside border, I just click on that, and as you can see, this border will now change. Now, let's look at the different types of formatting for numbers. This is the general format for numbers. This is the money format / currency format, and this is the accounting format. The difference between these two formats is that negative numbers will have a negative sign in the currency / money format, and the accounting format will have parentheses. Next, let's look at the different types of alignments within your cell. We can look at the top left alignment being the top left, and in order to go to alignments, you can come up to here where it says alignment, and you're able to change the alignment of these cells. So I'm going to go down these pretty quickly. As you can see, you can have different alignment types, and this might be helpful when formatting some sort of data that you would like to have in different areas on the cell. Okay, so let's get into selecting ranges. So it's pretty easy to select a range in Excel. Again, all you have to do is just click on the cell that you want to have. You can scroll down and you can just drag this, and now you've selected all of these cells. Now, this might take a while, especially if you have 100 rows, but it's not too bad, right? So easy there. It's a little bit harder here to do that if you have, let's say, 1,000 cells. So it's going to take a couple seconds to go all the way down to the 1,000 cell. As you can see, I made some mistakes there. I went too far down. So boom, 1,000 cells. Now, if I want to go back up, all I have to do is use this scroll button, which again might take some time, or just use the scroll function on my mouse. Now, it looks like it'll be really bad here because this looks like the data is going to go past 1,000. So another keyboard shortcut is you can click Control Shift, then the down arrow, and that will select all the data below the one cell that you selected. Now, if I want to go back up, all I have to do is click Control Shift up, and it'll bring me back to the top of that data. All right, guys, so that is the portion of formatting and basics of Excel, entering data into cells and whatnot. But let's move into something a little bit more complicated, such as functions and formats. I'm going to pull back up the PowerPoint. That way we can get back into this presentation and go from here. So we went over all of these. Remember, these are important when formatting your data in Excel, and it's super useful to have as a knowledge base when working in different workbooks. Okay, so let's move on to the big part, working with formulas and functions into Excel. So there are basic arithmetic operations, which is just a fancy way of saying there's basic ways to add, subtract, divide, exponents, multiply, all of the above. These are the characters for those. Remember, Excel works on PEMDAS, so that means parentheses, exponents, multiplication, division, addition, and subtraction. You will work left to right. Now, this might sound a little bit complicated, but essentially what you want to do is you want to make sure that you're formatting your formulas and functions with regards to PEMDAS. Now, cell references is important. We'll get into that. A cell reference is basically just referencing a cell with another cell, and all you have to do here is put equals and the cell that you want. Now, let's hop into the workbook to go through some of these basics. Okay, guys, we're back in the workbook. We're going to go to this other tab called Formulas and Functions. Again, these are the arithmetic operations, and let's take a look at these below. So I have cell 1 and cell 2 below. I have 4 and 4. So if I want to add them, all I have to do is do the equal sign and select the first cell, add the addition sign here, and then select the second cell and click Enter. Now, if I want to subtract them, it'll be the same thing. As you can see up here in the formula bar, you can see that the formula is active here, but I also have the formula in the next column just to show it a little bit easier. So pretty straightforward. Use the sign that you want to calculate those operations on, and that's it. Okay, now that we're in the arithmetic operations, order of operations, what we want to do next is we want to ensure that we're following the order of operations correctly. So let's say we have these two formulas that we have in Excel. They look the same, but you get a different result. So in column E, we see the formula here, and also in column F, we see the formula in the formula bar. What we want to do is we want to add B25 plus C25 and divide it by D25. But in this case, it will actually divide C25 by D25 first and then add B25. The reason is because of PEMDAS, we go with division before addition, so it'll add the cell after, even though it starts at the beginning of the formula. So if we want to add these numbers first, what we will do is we'll throw a parentheses in front of the formula of B26 plus C26, and then we'll divide by D26 to get 6. It looks like the same formula, but it's actually different because the parentheses indicate that we need to do this set of operations first. It might seem simple, but when you have some complex calculations, you want to make sure that you're doing everything in the order of PEMDAS. PEMDAS can be also acronymed out to Please Excuse My Dear Aunt Sally. Okay, let's get into cell references, guys. So a cell reference, basically, it allows us to reference different cells. So I have this array of cells, and you'll hear me use that word array. An array just means an area of data. in Excel. So we have this array of cells. Let's say we want to reference the cell that has the number 1. We'll just go over here and click here. And as you see, if we pull down on this, there's a little icon here, and that allows us to dynamically reference those cells related. As we pull down, it will pull down on the cell reference. So it goes from B30 to B31 and alike. Now, if we want to pull off the rows, we're just going to pull to the right or left, and it'll reference the cell to the right or left. As you see, I pulled over an extra here, and there's nothing in this value of E30 in this cell, so it'll pull up a 0. Now, if I want to pull the whole table reference somewhere else, I can just do this. Instead of having to pull one by one, I can reference all these cells. So let's try that again. Let's clear this out. We're going to clear these cells. I'm going to clear contents. We'll click equals. We'll click this. Click enter. Now, if we want to pull it down to get all those values, we'll pull this way. And if we want to pull the values across, we'll pull this way. There we go. We have our table of values in another area in Excel. Let's hop back into the PowerPoint and get into some more complicated formulas, a little bit more than what we just dealt with. Okay, as you saw, as we drag, we move the cell reference. Let's work on a practice example together. We're going to copy and paste this table. We're going to find the total per day, and we'll make it bold. So in Excel, if you have a properly formatted table in another document, you're able to actually copy and paste this table and paste it into Excel. So we're going to select the whole table in PowerPoint, and we're going to go to Excel, and we're going to paste this table in. Now, I have this exercise already solved up here, but let's go down and let's just paste this in. So we'll paste this in. Now we see the day of the week, we see the tutoring fee per hour, and we see how many hours was in this day of work. So if we want to get the total sales in tutoring fees, or the total collected tutoring fees, what we'll do is we'll take this cell, we'll multiply it by the number of hours in cell D13. Now we have this. We can either go down and do the same thing for each cell. You do this, or much easier, you can just start at the top, and you know all the formulas are going to be the same. We'll pull this down, and it'll give us all the values. Simple enough. Let's move on to more formulas and functions. Okay, so let's hop back into the slide deck. We were able to do this. Now, time to learn functions. This is why Excel is so incredibly powerful, because it offers a gallery of functions that will help us solve business-related issues in the real world. So what is a function? A function is an Excel pre-built formula that allows us to perform a specific calculation, such as adding numbers, finding an average, or searching for data. Now, this list is not exclusive to the many more different types of functions that are built into Excel, but this is a good starting point. How to write a function? It's easy. So you'll write the function name, and then you'll feed it some parameters or parameter. Parameter is just a fancy term of saying, what does the function need to calculate the actual formula? And here, what we want to do is we want to paste in the parameters or reference the parameters, and those parameters being either cells or values. Another word for this is arguments. You can paste or select the arguments into the function. So let's hop into Excel and look at some of these functions. Okay, so we have a list of functions here. These are a very short list of functions that we'll be working with, but these are the basic functions that we'll start with. Let's start with the first function, and it's called the if function. The if function is a logical function. So what a logical function is, it basically returns true or false. So in this exercise, we have a name and a height, and we want to find out if Jimmy is taller than Marcus. So what we can do is we can write equals if parentheses open. What you'll see is you'll have a string of text down here and related to their argument slash parameters. So in this case, we have a logical test. So what is a logical test? A logical test is just a statement that says if something is not something, or something is something, or if this is true, or if this is false. It is kind of endless, the different types of tests you can do in Excel. But in this case, we want to see, is Jimmy taller than Marcus? So what we'll do is we'll select Jimmy's height, and we'll say if C15 is greater than C14, then that would be true. Now, if it's not, we'll put that it'll be false. So in this case, we know that Jimmy is taller than Marcus, but we want to know who is taller. So let's do something a little bit more complicated. Let's do equals if. Let's do the same test. Now, the next value, instead of writing true, let's write in parentheses, Jimmy is taller, quotation marks, not parentheses, excuse my mistake. And let's do open quotation marks, Jimmy is shorter. So when we click enter, it's going to return that first value as Jimmy is taller because this is true. Now let's change height to 100 for Marcus. Now we know that the result of the formula is false, and we know that Jimmy is shorter. That's just one way you can use the if statement in Excel. Let's go quickly through these remaining functions. Sum, very easily put here. All you have to do is just do equals sum, and we know that there are specific arguments for this function. We know that number 1 is being the first number that we want to sum. So if we just do one number, it's just going to return 1. Now let's change this here, and this down here is just the formula that we're putting in that cell so you guys can see it. So let's do equals sum. Now instead of selecting just one, let's go down this whole array of cells. Let's close this parentheses. Now we have 15. Now let's say we only want to sum the first one and then the last two. We can put this number here. We put a comma. Now we have a second number. We can select the last two cells in this case, close it up. Now we get 10. As you can see, it's a pretty powerful function. I'm going to return this back to summing the entire column. So again, select this array. Or if you really like, you can just select this, parentheses, this, parentheses, this, parentheses, this, parentheses, B25. I can't see it on my screen, so that's it. Get us the same result, and that is that. Okay, let's get into the average function. The average function works the same as the sum function. Not going to go over that again, but basically what you do is just feed it the average function here, and feed it the array of cells. The same thing goes for the count function. So let's say we want to count the number of cells in an array. We're going to do the same thing as the average and the sum function. Now, let's say we had nothing in one cell. It will actually update to 4. The reason is because count counts all the cells that have a value in them. So if we take out these values, the count function will lower to 3. Now let's add these values back in, and it will go back to 5. Now let's work with the max and min function, very similar to the sum function. So again, you select the array of cells you want to find the max value in, and the same thing goes for the min function. All right, everybody, so we are back into the PowerPoint presentation. Let's go over cell references quickly, and let's go through a quick exercise, and then we can close out today's lesson. So what happens if we want to lock a cell and have a cell change in another place? We referenced cells before, but we only reference them as a reference cell. So there are 4 different types of references. A relative reference, which we've been over. There is the absolute reference, which we're going to go over, which essentially all it does is just block a cell so that if you move that cell reference, it will not change the cell that you're referencing. That is written by putting $2 signs in front of the one being in front of the column and one being in front of the row. Or you can do hotkey FN F4, and that will also do that. An absolute column reference, you put the $ in front of the column. So as you see here, equals $A1, and then absolute row. Mixed reference would be a $ in front of the row number. This will be the end of part 2 of Intro to Excel. Stay tuned for part 3, where we'll get into some exercises and close off the module number 1.